Now, Aubrey, everyone knows the post office is in a bad financial situation, to say the least. Isn't the strike action ill-timed considering the difficulties it's currently going through?
Well, we start by saying that everyone knows that post office is in a bad financial state because workers went on strike to expose corruption that was there. If it was workers, no one would have known. In fact, would have thought that it's not a viable business. So today, workers are going back on strike precisely to highlight one of the areas that were not dealt with effectively. Amongst others is the modus operandi of the South African Post Office, where you find that they neglect their own building and utilize the most expensive building in the malls and so on and so forth. But also you have to bear in mind that workers have been so patient. Since 2014, they stopped their strike, waiting for their salary increase. It is 2016 now. That has not happened. For the past 22 years, they've been working under casualization. Nothing has moved as far. So you can understand the passion and the frustration of workers in that regard. But more so, the collapsing of post office, week in, week out, you hear reports about post offices in a state of paralysis. And that we are saying it happens because there is no significant political will from the government side to inject funds into South African Post Office so that it can come back to recapitalization.
Now, Aubrey, the whole purpose of a strike is to put pressure on those in power to make a change or meet the demands of the workers in this instance. Now, let's look at today's strike, for example. Around only 1%, I think, of workers went on strike or went on the work stoppage. What's your actual assessment of today's strike? Is it yielding the results that you were hoping it would yield?
Well, I'm not so sure of 1%. I think there's a significant pressure. Today we've met with South African Post Office management and their board members. And if it was not this strike, we didn't have had that meeting. I think it's a sensitive stage at this point in time. But more so, we facing all our arsenals to the government as we are marching to Tuli House tomorrow. Because those are the people who makes decision in terms of deploying people in government, in the board of South African Post Office, as well as in the National Treasury.
Now, the situation at the post office has been going on for a long time now. I mean, you've been here even a couple of times, and we've had this discussion. Why do you think it's not changing? Who needs to bring about the change at the post office?
Well, by and large, more so in the National Treasury, we have to point it there, that you find that there are people that who wants to make sure that post office collapse for one single reason, that they eventually want to privatize it, so that few hyenas who are waiting by sideways can benefit out of that. And we know what happens when an institution is privatized. First and foremost, there will be cut-off jobs and so on and so forth. So we believe that based on the neoliberalism that has been entrenched in the treasury, that's why there's no political will to inject funds. I mean, there's a number of state-owned entities that have been bailed out year in, year out. Post office in its lifetime has never been bailed out. And we know that at this point in time, it's where it is, not because of the business is not viable, but it's because of the corruption that happened there.
Now, you say that the post office has never been bailed out. Isn't that then contradictory to what government is saying that the post office, can be used as a way to empower the people, either through its post bank and through other various outlets that it has? So isn't that contradictory then, in that sense, considering they are saying that the post office is necessary because it can be used and people in rural areas are still able to, send letters, etc. So why are they not on par in terms of that statement?
You are quite right. The post office is a significant institution. It's needed in this country, actually all over the world, to benefit for universal access and all of that. If post office actually does not need a direct bailout for free, what needs to happen is that by now government, we know that it spends over 20 billion rands per annum on the Korean postal services, but on private sector. If you utilize that business, put it to post office, we all know that it will automatically bail it out. We have had this annoying and irritating announcement from the Minister of Home Affairs, Gigaba, who said that he will use the captains of white monopoly capital banks such as FNB, Nedbank and Standard Bank for issuing of the smart card IDs. We have a post bank. Why did not they use it?
And I want to touch on that. Why wasn't post bank used, for example? Is it because the post office has been going through a tumultuous couple of years, or is it because they just simply chose to use the top 4 banks?
Well, that question could be correct to be posed at the government, but our suspicion is that there's no political will. These people want to see post office privatized, and that's why they're not willing to invest in it to make sure that it succeeds in its initiative to service the poor and so forth.
Let's shift focus now and look at some of your other demands. So, one of the most important ones is taking your casual workers and making them permanent employees. How's that process coming along? Is it realistic at this point in time, considering the post office's financial situation?
Very realistic. If you look into the report that was issued by the public protector, post office have been saying that they need 100 million rands to convert all those people into permanent position. But we've seen in the report that they've used 2.7 billion rands to employ labor brokers to casualize workers. But let's take it further. If someone was employed at 30 years old and for the past 22 years is now 52 years old, is only left with 3 years to save for pension. Now, that is a dire situation that we find ourselves at. Can you still expect workers to be patient around that?
Aubrey, your stats are quite clear. You know what you're talking about. You're giving me figures here. I mean, you've just said they're spending about 2.7 billion rand to employ labor brokers. With the stats that you have, are you perhaps not taking it to the right people? Are they simply just choosing to ignore it when you do take it to them and say, look, we've got the figures here. This is what's happening. In fact, you would save money if you employed these people permanently.
We are partly happy that the current CEO seems to be singing the same tune. But unfortunately, if there's no fund, he cannot move anywhere. But you'll recall that since 2007, moving to 2011, we have gone to the public protector, opened a case, made noise about it, put pressure for her to release that report, for us to be vindicated at long last, because they wanted to blame workers for strikes, that's why post office is in that dire situation. We proved them wrong. And I think we are doing very well. There's a SIU report that was initiated by the state president of the country. Obviously, we have not received it, but we are quite convinced that it will show us the results. More so, what we need to do is that if everything has been done, people that have put a post office into this situation must obviously be taken for prosecution in terms of the law. That's why tomorrow we are going to via past Johannesburg police station to open a case against those so that they can be formally charged.
Now, when can we expect this SIU report to be released? Any dates?
We heard through the grapevine that the minister Kwele has a report with him. It's been issued, but it's not been released for reasons that is known to them. But hence we are going to, one of the issues that we'll be demanding at Luthuli House is that report must be made available and what action needs to be taken thereafter the report has been issued. You've
just mentioned Minister Kwele. Let's look at the role and responsibility of the Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services. Where do they fit in here? Because a lot of the time they're not even mentioned. We hear the CEO, we hear the board, we hear the Communications Workers Union, and we hear about the employees. Where are they in this instance?
Well, you'll recall that in 2014, when we ended the strike, there was a significant role played by the minister, Kwele, to end the strike. He even called a meeting of all stakeholders at a particular time that we must come and resolve the issue. And I think at that particular time, Minister Kwele was playing a very good role.
And now, because that was 2014, that's 2 years ago.
It seems like powers have disappeared, but nevertheless, it's not in our interest. Our interest, that's why we are going to the ANC to say that if you have deployed people to be chairperson of the board, if you have deployed people to be ministers of finance, you have deployed people to be ministers of telecommunication and postal services, why are we not taking the resolution of the ANC in the national conference in the NGC that says post office must be recapitalized and also must make sure that it empowers the poor, must create jobs, sustainable jobs and all of that. Why those resolutions are not find themselves expressed in the post office if you have your own employees? So those are the questions that we are asking at this point in time, unless there's another will that decides to go other way.
Maybe to go back to something you said earlier on, that the new CEO is singing the same tune as you are. Does this mean that the union has faith in the new leadership of the post office, or is it a
our relationship with any employer is on the basis that we trust you the moment we work with you. It's only you that's gonna make us lose that trust on you. So any person that comes in, we give them the space, we give them what is needed, but of course that's gonna come out in terms of what you do thereafter. But what is important as well is that how do you judge the CEO if he says there's no money and you know there's no money? The problem is there at government, the problem is there at the Tule House to deal with those issues.
Okay, the Communication Workers Union has called for a 2-day work stoppage. What happens if your demands aren't met this time around? Where to from here?
Well, you know us, we are a very militant union. When we make threats, we not make empty threats. We told the Tule House on the 14th of February that should they not accede to our demands, we'll issue a notice of intention to strike on a protected strike. And we did exactly that. Now we are saying that it's 2 days. We are going to march. We are going to give them 7 days. And should they not respond, obviously we're going to go to a fully blown strike, making sure that we shut down everything. But it doesn't end there. Remember, we have problems also at Telkom, which is in the same department, so we can have a roll-out mass action on that.
So it's going to trickle down from the post office to Telkom, you're saying, if your demands aren't met after 7 days?
To broadband in Franco, to Trudon.
So you're taking it all the way?
All the way.
Aubrey, thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
That was Aubrey Tshabalala. He's the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. He was giving us an update on the 2-day work stoppage at the South African Post Office.